Hello everyone, I'd like to demonstrate an app I made for Deeply Nested Bloc for version 8.0.0 plus, because I found that there was a lot of information on Bloc, but not so much information on the new Bloc. First off, we need to go ahead and add these dependencies to your pubspec.yaml. The Flutter block, equatable, hydrated block. Hydrated block is wonderful because it allows us to use persistent memory without having to implement a whole bunch of new functionality. Path provider, which goes with the hydrated block, and then the YouTube player Flutter package. We're also going to have to change the deployment target in Xcode. Do that by going to the iOS folder and open in Xcode. Then what we need to do is look for the building settings and then make sure that you go change the iOS deployment target, iOS 14, on both of this and on this. Your learning intentions for today are you will be learning about Block 8 and higher. You will learn to work with deeply nested data, use logic for CRUD operations, and apply persistent memory. Let's go ahead and look at what the app does. This is a simple app. The idea that when you press on a collection, a new series adds to itself. Pressing a series, a new season adds to the proper place in the hierarchy, and pressing a season adds an episode to itself. When adding an episode, the app prompts the user for a YouTube link, and when the episode is pressed, the app shows the YouTube video. It remains in persistent memory, so if we were to go out of here and then restart again, we would have our hierarchy return. Now let's look at the code. First, let's start with the main.dart. And we are just going to be using this code for the main.dart. We need to add this right here to go ahead and add the functionality for the block, and specifically for the hydrated block storage, we're going to need to have this storage variable that's right here. Everything else should be pretty self-explanatory. And now let's look at the elements for the blocks. In our cases, we're going to need to have the block, the events, and then the state model. This is the code for the blocks, and it all comes from an abstraction, which are extending our classes. And we've got several different ones to handle the CRUD functionality and the other functionalities for the app. Here's state, which is basically the model for it. In our case, and we're going to need for the block, let's go ahead and do this initial constructor, and then we're going to have copy with in to JSON, and then from JSON. The nested code looks something like this. Each collection state holds a children of collection state, which can store each other, something very similar to what you can see in a composite design pattern. Now, this logic that we're going to have is based on an enum, and it's called the show type enum, which is going to be a collection, a series, season, and episode. This is just named this way because we're all familiar with these types of hierarchies. And then we're also going to, in this case, have a helper function to get show type. This is specifically for the to and from JSON functionality. Now this is the block. It's important to note that it extends the hydrated block, which allows us to have persistent memory, and then these on functions that are called from the block. The hydrated block requires that you have from JSON and to JSON. So logic of the CRUD, create, read, update, delete. first off, let's go ahead and see that we need a naming dialog box. And what this does is allows us to change the name of our objects when we want to. So upon creation, we could do this. Also, if you hold down, if you long press on the names, you're going to have to go ahead and be able to change it as well. If you just click, you can add a seasons. If you long press, you can change the name. And here is the naming dialog box code. Materials, services, and the mouse are needed in this particular code. All right, now let's look at the create node, which has a switch, and then the switch looks at the different show types. And in our case, we need to notice that it's going to add to a top layer, and then it's also going to add to the nodes. So to keep it as simple as possible, I've worked my code so that we can add to the parent or add to any node inside of the hierarchy. It also is going to navigate to the next page versus the add nodes, okay? So different clicks on the show types are going to result in different things happening. Here's the delete node functionality for our CRUD operations, which is dependent upon the different show types. And again, to keep it very simple, we're going to delete from the parent node, and also then we're going to delete from the nested node, so deleting from the deep nodes in the hierarchy. The read functionality is quite simple. Again, just to keep it nice and simple, we're going to get all the nodes including the parent, and then we'll get all the nodes excluding the parent, and this will be for our UI display later on. And here's the update node. Now, it's either going to be updating the node name or updating the node web address, and these are just the two different functionalities. One will deal specifically with the name, while the others we're going to handle the web address. Now let's take a look at all the helper functions that we are going to implement in this code. So this is the code specifically for adding to the top layer of the data. So this would be just adding specifically to, in our hierarchy, that very first collection state that holds a child. Okay, now this is the code from deleting a child from the parent node. And this will be deleting the code from a hierarchy. When I'm working with these two different nodes on the different levels of the hierarchy, this is to keep it simple. Now, realize that there are going to be design patterns that we would implement for this, but this is just for us to get a very brief and very topical look at the code and what's required to affect the very deeply nested data. Here's the rename node in the hierarchy. And this is the renaming the web address in the hierarchy, the code for it as well. Now let's take a look at the pages. In this case, this is the home page, and I've added some very neat code to go ahead and add that the plus button inside of the list view. The button that I'm talking about. So when I push the button and I just go ahead and add a series, it's going to continue to float down in this list view no matter how many times that I add it. Now that plus button is dealt with right here on this code, and then with the logic, if the index is not this, then we're going to have this plus button insert. Otherwise, we're going to divert to what this is going to be right here, okay? In this, then, we're just going to load the node, which is going to be the parents excluding, get all nodes of parent excluding the parent. It's going to get a text color and a distance just to add a little bit of flavor, and this code is found down at the bottom of the file. And then this is the typical code right here for just a list tile. And it's going to create a node when it's pressed, and on long press we're going to change its name. And also by pressing the subtraction, we're going to remove from the data as well. And here's navigate to the next page, which has an adaptive view player, which is going to change itself depending on the orientation that you hold the device. It's going to take a parent node, and then it's going to look and determine whether its orientation is landscape or not. If it is landscape, it's not going to include the app bar. And then the body itself is just this 2-view video player. Now, notice though, I've had to include this processed URL. YouTube, since the YouTube player has been made, has added some different functionality for, like, instance, the short videos that it uses. And then we have to add this to take into consideration that functionality. Let's just kind of explain the code. What it's looking for is the different types of YouTubes, and then it's going to convert it to a form that the YouTube player can use. Okay, so currently we have these different functionalities, these different types of YouTubes, these YouTube URLs that are available to us from YouTube, and for our YouTube player to work, it needs it in a very specific format, which we'll take a look at here in a second. So we need to go from shorts to, like, YouTube Watch V, and this will be how we convert it to that. We've just had a look for the code for our video player, which is going to give us this very simple to-do list, except for we're calling it a to-view app, which is going to allow us to take a look at YouTube videos. And it gives us the regular CRUD operations, create, read, update, and delete, that we typically are looking for inside of a simple app like this.